You are now listening to The Jason D'Amico Show.
Greetings, folks. Welcome back to The Jason D'Amico Show, and so happy to have you back with us. Special thanks to all the great distribution platforms out there, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Simplecast for having us. And you can go to jasondamico.com/JDS podcast for more insight and episode links and for more information there. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm so blessed and so grateful to have this guest on the show today. He's an entertainment industry veteran who is undoubtedly a force to be reckoned with. His director of photography, editing, and executive production credits include notable names such as Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Run DMC, Chris Rock, Neil Young, just to name a few. You've probably heard of these guys. He's in the process of spearheading a cutting-edge feature film production titled Steelway with Realm Pictures, based on the true post-Civil War story of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. We'll be getting to that in a second. Really, really interesting story and concept. Please welcome to the show, Stephen Ashley Blake.
Great to be here, Jason. Thanks for having me here.
It is great to have you, my friend. And before we start getting into Steelway and all the great concepts that are behind that, I got to say, what an incredible credit list. You have been in the industry hustling it out for, decades at this point. Such a wealth of knowledge. It's truly an honor to have you.
Well, it's great to be here, and it's been a great journey. And, may the journey I've been blessed to have reflect and pale in comparison to the journeys that others watching this themselves will have. We're sort of in this together. And if anything I've done, any place I've been can be of help to anyone who themselves is on a journey, then again, it's just all the more reason to be here.
That's great. Well, to get into things, let's start with your beginning stages. I read somewhere, heard somewhere that we have a lot of similarities, believe it or not, with film and capturing, because the only difference is, for me, it was with a 8mm home video camera. I think for you it was Super 8. So it's a little bit of a generational difference, but your uncle gave you a camera when you were about 9 years old, if I'm correct in that. Walk me through those stages of kind of what was going on with the filmmaking mind, and just, I was doing the same thing with, friends, and just getting anybody together to do something creative. So I think it's great. It's fascinating. I want to learn more about it.
Yeah. So I was raised by the time I was 8, 9, I lived in Altadena, California, which is just above Pasadena, California. And an uncle gave me a regular 8 camera at first. And what is this thing? I had no sense of filmmaking, no knowledge of filmmaking, obviously no experience in filmmaking. And I don't recall what prompted me to take that gift and to actually then start utilizing it. But I did. I began making regular 8 films, and I began casting my sisters and neighbors and friends. Not only in live action stories, narratives, but I actually did a lot of pixelation and animation too back when I was 8 or 9. And I remember vividly when Super 8 came about, which was amazing, because rather than having these spools that you had to sort of thread through the camera, expose half of, and then go into a dark room, flip it over and expose the other half. This was like one cartridge, and you could just shoot the whole. There were like 50-foot cartridges. Wow. Later, there were 200-foot cartridges. So I began to create a lot of sort of these dramatic films. I remember one horror film that I made about this terror bench that would chase people down streets and consume them ultimately. I wish I still had that footage. And then my mom enrolled me in a place in inner city filmmaking sort of class at a place called the Pasadena Art Workshops. And I had a great mentor named John Clark Matthews, sort of a legendary, very eclectic animator who would later go on to work with Sony and do Stuart Little, the Stuart Little films, and work for other studios as well. And that just then sort of enhanced my filmmaking abilities. I did a lot of cell animation then, just the way Disney did back for, Bambi and Cinderella, and again, more live action. And John proved to be a great mentor in that he also composed. He was a Renaissance man. So I took an interest in music early on as well. And by the time I was in high school, I was already a pretty active amateur filmmaker. And then that's when I transitioned in high school into working professionally in the industry.
Wow. So you grew up in California then?
Yeah.
So kind of in the Hollywood scene, acclimated to that energy. And I also heard somewhere else, I think it was on YouTube, you were at some point going up and down Hollywood Boulevard looking for any type of work you could get your hands on. At what point was that in this timeline of events with, just getting your door in for some internship for free just to get on a set and just start, catching some credits, working with some names, rubbing some shoulders? Where did that mindset come from? I remember reading somewhere about coming from a single parent household and maybe that had something to do with it.
Yeah. So by the time I was in high school, I knew that film was my journey. There was no question about that. So, and I hustled when once I knew that film was my trajectory, there was no alternate route. So in high school, because of someone I met through my mentor, John Matthews, I met another mentor named William Moffat, who had won an Emmy for like Scared Straight, and a great documentarian and commercial director, cinematographer. Through them, I actually began interning for a great producer named Arnold Shapiro at the KTLA Los Angeles lot. So I would leave high school at lunchtime and drive down from Pasadena, where I went to high school, down to Hollywood, and I would work there every day. But simultaneously, I really wanted to break into the business more broadly. So even as I worked with Arnold Shapiro on shows like Couples and various other shows that he had, and by the way, befriending everyone on the lot, I would walk around to all the different sound stages and just befriend, grips, electricians. I still remember there was a great technical director called Daryl Quinzler, who was the head of the local as a TD, a technical director. But simultaneously, I wanted to sort of just expand more into the industry, to discover more. So I created a resume, which basically had nothing on it. I confess that not everything on that resume was necessarily honest. But at that time, production was concentrated really in Hollywood. It's more diffuse and scattered now, but it was Hollywood. So I would park my car around Sunset and Vine, or Hollywood and Vine, or somewhere thereabouts, and I would just pound the pavement with a stack of printed resumes in hand, and I would walk, let's say, a mile and a half, let's say from a street we have called Gower. Mm-hmm. Maybe a mile and a half or 2 miles to the west, going over to Highland and La Brea. And then I would go north to Hollywood Boulevard, and then I would work my way back. And I would just basically walk into these production offices and say, "My name's Stephen Blake. You don't know me. I will do anything on your production. And I will work for free. I will scrub toilets, in effect." As it turns out, I landed my first commercial as a production assistant as the result of doing that. And it was for a company called The Little Folks Shop, I remember, shot in Eagle Rock, which is a city where Occidental College is here it's part of Los Angeles, here in Los Angeles. And on that job, my first job as a production assistant ever, I had never been paid before. And I said I would do this without being paid, but I hustled, man. I hustled. I was the first one there, and I did whatever I was asked. I did it with a smile. Yeah. And they ended up paying me like $50, which was like like the going rate for a production assistant back then. And I was off and running because my name spread like wildfire within, and this was actually a very prominent production company. So they had a lot of other colleagues and a lot of other companies that they sort of worked in synergy with. So my name spread very rapidly. And before I knew it, as a production assistant, I was turning down work. Wow. It was a really great sort of explosive entree into the business.
So you're, per se, you could say that you are the definition of attitude determines altitude. My father always told me that as a young kid, your attitude determines, just pounding it into my subconscious. Attitude. It's like, 10, 12 years old. It's the last thing you want to hear. But then you get into your 20s and you see how the real world works. There's so there's so much that goes into that. You know, you'd much rather work with somebody who maybe is a little green in the business, but is ready to work. And there's no diva mentality, and there's no this, that, and the other. They're ready to go. They're not going to question it. They're going to be firm about what they believe in, but they're still going to do what the director asks, you know, and that's a huge and valuable trait and value.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that. Attitude determines altitude. I've got to use that. I'll credit you for that, or credit your dad for that. But absolutely. I think, first of all, one is what you're doing. And I think you have to hurl yourself at walls. You know, when you see a wall, in fact, there's a quote that one of the key characters in the movie Steal Away we're doing, which we'll talk about later, that said, to quote him, because this choir changed the world and they left they sort of embarked upon this journey purely on faith. It was a ridiculous, absurd journey, but George Leonard White said, if God told me to jump through a wall, it would be mine to jump and his to put me through. So I think that the journey of the successful person starts with hurling yourself at walls, first of all. I don't see any other way of breaking through walls. And the walls are there. Statistically speaking, quote, I'll put this in quotes, you will likely fail. And yet people succeed every day. So how will you be one that defies then those odds and breaks through to actually succeed? And I think number one is just, it's the what. You have to hurl yourself at those walls. But two, you're exactly right, Jason. It's the attitude you have. No one wants to work with someone who's cocky or thinks they know it all, or who's not humble enough. And the truth is that whether you're, even if you're, 747s need someone to clean the toilets. I mean, that's just part of the necessity of operations. And so if you say, I'm the one that's going to do that, you're proving yourself to be that person that gets the big picture, that's supportive of the team and the project as a whole, and you're asserting yourself as being reliable. And your solid gold, that is a person that a company, a producer, a production manager, or a director, if you're fledgling talent, can say, I can work with this person. And you know what? I want to work with this person. So attitude is absolutely everything. And I'll add one more thing to that.
Please.
There's another mindset that says, well, I'm not going to do anything unless I'm well paid for it. I've got to get paid, or I'm not going to. Understand this. You are basically digging your own grave in the industry, because any production company, no matter whether you are, wanting to work as a production assistant or a boom person for the sound mixer, or an assistant costume designer, you have competitors out there, people that have been doing this far longer than you have been, people that on paper or at first glance are infinitely more reliable and a better bet than you are, right? There's every reason for a producer not to work with someone who's fledgling over someone who's established. So you have to level that playing field. And I have met many people who take and to this day, I talk to some people who take a hard stand and say, well, I don't do anything unless I'm well paid, or I don't do anything unless I'm paid at all. And I personally have never known anyone who's taken that stand that has ever gone anywhere. Right. The payment will come, the money will come. In fact, I'll mention this as a point of reference. When I was a production assistant, there was a great French cinematographer called Philippe Rousselot, and he was already a legend in France.
Yeah.
Brilliant DP, director of photography, but he wasn't known in the States, so the studios weren't really hiring him. So he came to the States because he wanted to forge a career here in the US. And I was fortunate enough to work as a production assistant on a short film that he was the cinematographer on. Now, he was already a legend of a theatrical motion picture cinematographer in France, right? But he sort of condescended, if you will, took on a freebie project, again, which I was privileged to work on as a production assistant, and so that he could establish himself here in the States. And of course, it worked. He did this project. Everyone saw his amazing work, and he went on to shoot some of the sort of legendary films of the past 25, 30 years. So that mindset of humility, of, you know what, I don't need to make money now. Money's coming. And when a producer sees that you believe in yourself so much that you don't need to, rake in the cash right now, they know that you're going to hustle for that. They know they can count on you because you're already factoring in your success. You're factoring in your trajectory, and they know that your success depends on how well you serve this project that they're producing. So I would say, big picture, and the action and the attitude are absolutely the ingredients, I would say, to success.
That's so great. And we've got a lot of listeners in the creative community, so that was a really good nugget of knowledge for anybody who's, middle school, high school,
Sure.
in college. It's good stuff. Really good stuff. Who were some of your influences when you were coming up, maybe 2 to 3 with film per se? We'll stay focused on film for now. But if there were others, then please bring them up. That really just that you latched onto and said, man, I've got to do this. I've got to figure out how they're doing this, how they're doing this shot. Maybe they were in person in Hollywood because you had the accessibility to that landscape and that geography. Who are some of those people?
Sure. There are 3 of them. 2 of them aren't filmmakers. The first one, huh?
I had a feeling for some reason that it was going to be a tapestry of different arts that were influential for you.
Absolutely, because greatness, of course, exceeds the bounds of film proper, and yet I think our antennae should be sort of omnidirectional, and we should be willing to take in inspiration from any number of fields. So the first one was a great cinematographer, the cinematographer Jordan Cronenweth, who shot Blade Runner and Altered States, and just a great director of photography. In my estimation, one of the greatest of all time. If you look at the original Blade Runner, you'll see absolute visual mastery, frame by frame by frame, compositionally and lighting wise. And I was working as a production assistant and still at that stage trying to nail down, because of course, once you enter the film realm, you can become a costume designer, production designer, editor, VFX person, director, producer, right? There are all these different crafts sort of within the sphere of film. And I was working as a production assistant on a Pioneer Stereo commercial, and the cinematographer was the great Jordan Cronenweth. And working with Jordan, working on the same project as Jordan on that project was extraordinary and opened my mind to the absolute, the incredible sphere of photography, cinematography, which is photography in motion.
Right.
And Jordan became a bit of a mentor of mine, actually, and would allow me to come onto his shoots, and went to screenings with him as well. He was tremendously influential with respect to me. I was young. In fact, I then sort of pivoted and partly as a result of working with Jordan, began shooting as a cinematographer, independent genre films, which I did a lot of. The other 2 mentors are Leonard Bernstein, the composer conductor, and Peter Tchaikovsky, the composer. Oh, wow. And Tchaikovsky, of course, it was one of the most brilliant composers of all time, and he was a 19th century composer. But what was extraordinary about Tchaikovsky to me, and I've read everything, I've read all of his surviving journals and his letters to family, letters to his patroness, and many biographies, is that he had a gift, and many have a gift, right? There's like 10 different people can decide to build houses or to build chairs or to paint paintings, and probably only 1 or 2 of those are going to be really remembered, if that many are going to be remembered or become beloved. Now, Tchaikovsky had that stuff. He had that stuff. What he envisioned musically, what he saw, what he heard in his mind, is the stuff that the world wanted to hear. But part 2 is, of course, the most amazing ideas and conceptions gather dust unless you're rendering them and actually producing them. You have to pull them out of here and get them onto the page or onto the score or onto the screen. And Tchaikovsky considered himself to be, when people would praise him as a genius, he said, nope. He says, I work hard. He says, I work hard. He goes, in fact, internally, I'm a lazy man, he said, but I know how to summon my muse to the table, and I know how to overcome my laziness. And that's my gift. I know how to render. And that mindset that takes this idea, this sort of nebulum of thoughts, right, which we all have a tune. Oh yeah, this tune comes to mind, or I have this picture of this sort of house or sculpture that I'm kind of picturing in my mind, but then carrying that through to completion is like everything. And that has been my driver in terms of sitting down and working. And as we know, creative work is very often 10% inspirational, 90% perspirational. So you really have to often, despite bad moods, and I don't feel like doing this, and it's not working out. And Tchaikovsky said himself, sometimes I'll sit down for 10, 11, 12 days on end, just working, and it's not working out for me, but I persevere. And on that 13th day, it comes.
Boom.
And then Bernstein is something very similar. What was tremendous about Leonard Bernstein, many, many things that were tremendous about Bernstein, is one of the great, great figures, I think, of all time, but was that whatever Bernstein did, and he composed, of course, West Side Story and Candide and various others, but he also, he conducted. He was a legendary conductor, and he knew how to bring symphonies and concertos and tone poems to life almost like no other. And what Bernstein would do from the first time he got his big break with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, filling in for a sick conductor, he owned and inhabited that music so fully that by the time he actually conducted the orchestra, he was just exuding what it was. It wasn't a contrivance anymore. It wasn't a confection. He had owned it, imbibed it, and embodied it so much. In other words, he applied himself to delving into this music, so that then it was like breathing for him. I won't bore you with that story, but these qualities of, you have this gift, okay, great, but a gift stays a wrapped gift unless you unwrap it and you build that, unless you render it and deliver it. So those together, the art, and then both conceptually and in the rendering of that art, are what really have shaped my entire career. And then the willingness to explore and to experiment, and not to, some people, for example, in film have a certain look or a style that they go after, which is perfectly fine. There are 1,000 ways to skin a cat. But my interest really is in exploring. Okay, I've done this already. What would Stephen look like sort of expressing, in this context with this kind of a music video? He might not be the same. So it's a journey. Art for me is an ongoing journey of self-exploration and of an ongoing sharing process with the world of listeners and hearers as well. And equally, I love to go to concerts and dance performances and galleries and museums, art openings and theater, so I can drink in what other artists are doing as well, so that really informs me. So those are in sort of short version, the things that summarize my journey, and those that have influenced then how I go about this thing called life and the creative journey.
That's great. I love the rendering. I love that. And almost like in surmise to just take action. And I think Absolutely. We've seen that. I don't know if you're a follower of some of these guys, like the kind of this Gary V craze in the social media world, and Grant Cardone. And it's like, it just keeps funneling down into my social media. It's like I'll look at one video and then I'm seeing Big Brother of social media throwing me all these other videos of, hustler mentality. Yeah. But there's really something to be said about that with the rendering process and being able to funnel and really manifest into the physical what's going on beyond the 3D, and to really bring that into that creative into this space. And it's really remarkable. I mean, scripture will back it up. Other ancient religious teachings will back it up. That concept of it's all up here. And this is all a functionality of us being creators, created by the ultimate creator, whatever that looks like, however that is, that's to everybody's own soul to really determine. I believe in the creative spirit and definitely a creator, just based on my personal experience. And it's like, to be able to tap into that divine like that, that's huge, but you got to be able to render it. And what is it? Faith. What's that one? Faith without works is dead. Something right. To that extent. I mean, you could use that in 1,000 different ways and turn that upside down and right side up. But I think that's a great example of really having the faith, especially in this business, to be able to move forward into something like Steelway, like anything else that you've done in your career. And you're a man of action. Man of action for sure. Well,
I'm blessed to work with many colleagues who are also likewise people of action. And you're exactly right. I also look at the universe. I look at creation, and I love science. So I'm an embracer of science very richly. Yeah. And I believe that the creative mind of God has created this, and most beautifully, He's created us to be creators. So what we're doing, in a sense, is sort of microcosmically not unlike the process that got us here. And I think that, faith without works is dead in a sense. I can definitely see a correlation to what we were just saying. You can have all the great ideas, in your head that you want, but if you're not putting them out there, what good are those ideas? Like, what good are they? In fact, they're probably aggravating and frustrating you by their non-material existence, right? And I think one of the other things that came to mind, Jason, is that I think it's really important for us to give ourselves permission to fail.
Yeah.
I literally had to put I have these sorts of stands I use to put notepads on, to put notes on my desk that face me. And for me to get out of the paralysis of analysis, I had to create a big sign here that said, "Write junk." I had to give myself permission to write garbage so that I could just vomit that out.
Oh, it's so good.
There's something powerful about just and the other example I think about is there was a movie back in the ancient days called Close Encounters. I was like from the 17th century, maybe before the time of some of these, but there was this character named Roy who pictured this mountain in his head, right? And this idea of a mountain, this picture of a mountain obsessed his mind. And so he's a family man. And one day he goes and he splashes like mashed potatoes all over his living room floor. And then he's sculpting these mashed potatoes to resemble this mountain he sees in his head. And of course, his wife, freaks out over that. But I think that's a great analogy. First, just get the mashed potatoes on the floor. Just get it out. Write garbage, write junk, write stuff that is abominably horrible and no one would ever listen to. But then it's there. And there's something powerful about crossing that first chasm, because that biggest gulf, I think, is that gulf from the non-existence of the manifestation of an idea. It's just in here. It doesn't exist out there, to getting it into the world, getting it into existence. Now, once you've done that, and that I've found that can be excruciating sometimes, because I know I'm better than this, and the stuff that's coming out of my head is ridiculous. But once you've crossed that initial chasm, then you can put on your surgical gloves and you can start to shape and sculpt. And that's another journey I've found anyway. So one of my rules, it's absolutely a hard rule, which harkens back to Tchaikovsky and many, many other artists as well, is just get it out. Get version one, just get it out there. Just get it out there. Get it out there. And you've just crushed now the non-existence. I think that's the biggest barrier of your work. And you can refine and you can revise and whatnot. And by the way, and this for film production, for example, this goes through the entirety of a film. I can't tell you how many times things get revised and improved and enhanced during the course of production, and how often, even on the back end during editing, you're continuing to sculpt your film. And thank God you didn't just close up and freeze and paralysis on the front end, because you couldn't see the final destination from the front end. Yeah, it is a journey, and you have to understand that my site isn't 2020 going forward. And let me give myself permission just to put it out there, knowing I can revise, knowing I can revise, knowing I can revise as well. So action, momentum, being in process, not just in speculation, is I would say a very, very vital trait.
It's so good. So good. I could expand on that, but I'm not, because we hit so much there, and for the sake of hitting everything else that we need to get to, such a great conversation. Really, really love it. Real quick, well, while we're on this, talking about creative, I have on here creative process, writing, cinematography. If you could just touch on that for a minute or two, your personal creative process and how that works for you. If there's some people, they like doing their early morning routine. You kind of sound like you're more leaning towards that. Some, they're doing 1, 2 in the morning, staying up late, working with visions, working with kind of everybody's got their own process. So I'd love to dive into that for a second.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jason. My process for cinematography would be different. For directing talent would be.
I believe that.
From writing. So I'll just with respect to writing, I am an early riser, and I like getting up hours. My workday starts at about 2 a.m. typically speaking, because I like having the universe to myself before. I have a wife and 3 kids, and I just love being awake hours before there is even an ounce of pull or tug on me, So
please tell me you're getting at least 5 hours of sleep.
I sleep 6 hours a night.
Wow. So Man, you're in
Yeah.
bed at what, 8 then or something? 8 or
I'm in bed at 8 p.m. Let's put it this way. If we're talking like on the phone at 8:15, I'm yawning like violently.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm in bed. And that took some discipline at the very beginning. But now, if you think about it, like 7-Eleven workers are up all night. And so you're like, okay, well, and interestingly, even when I would be on location shooting, you always have night.
Yeah, well, those overnight shoots.
Those overnight shoots, and you do it, and so I wake up very early because that time is my time. It's 100% mine. There's not a tug of any kind in the universe for my attention or distraction whatsoever. So my family usually starts waking up at around 6 a.m. So I get that 4 hours there. That's important for me. I make a cup of coffee, first thing in the morning. I don't need coffee, but I like coffee. So I have that. I love music, and I love various kinds of music. So depending on what I'm writing, I will put on some evocative music, and I'll usually loop it. And I don't want music that makes me think. I want music that's going to sort of massage me atmospherically, if you will.
I like that.
And then the journey is I sit down, and for me, I always know structurally what needs to happen during the course of, let's say, a scene. I know what the main beats of a scene need to be. I know that this character has just been devastated by this news. And I know by the end of the scene, this person has to have decided to take a course of action as a result of that. And in between the beginning and the end of that scene, that there's got to be this drama, blah, 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 blah. And so what I do is I start out, then I have the building blocks, and I start out and I just give myself permission to just go off on a journey, irrespective of how attractive it is, how ridiculous it is. I allow myself to just sort of spontaneously just write. So then what I'll do is I'll get to the end of the scene, and that journey has been a long journey because I override. I'm rephrasing things. What if he did that? What if he went over there instead of there, and turned off the light as opposed to reaching for a glass? And each of those has different implications in the way they play out.
Wow. Yeah.
Then I back up to stage one again, to the very beginning, and I'll walk around, clear the air, clear my head, and I go back, and then I'll do a second iteration of that scene and allow it to go wherever it will. And almost invariably, the second iteration of that same scene, rewriting that scene, but a second pass at it, my mind will go in other areas. It'll loop in other characters or other bits of dialogue. And I do that a few times. At the end of the day, for what might end up being a 5-page scene, I might have between 70 and 100 pages of, it's insane. So, wow. And then I begin the process of getting a little more cerebral and just, what stays, what goes, and then having more of a sort of a conscious a shaping of those materials, the sort of a shaping of those mashed potatoes. And and then I come to the end of that, and then I like to go back and revise later and polish. I'm a polisher, so. But yeah, as far as routine goes, I work from the wee hours, and then when 6 o'clock in the morning or so rolls around, my family starts waking up. I have family time, of course, but I get back in the saddle pretty quickly, actually, and remain here for most of the day. I turn off phone ringers. I don't do social media during the course of the day, et cetera. So for me, it's got to be that discipline. It's got to be discipline and the ability for me to shut out anything that would distract me from getting through what would be a productive day otherwise.
Absolutely. Well, we've done over 130 episodes on this show. I think you're going to be 134, if I have that correct.
Wow, that's fantastic.
This is the first time we've had somebody on who gets up at 2 a.m., folks. So just mark it right here. Stephen Ashley Blake, 2 a.m.er. This is wild. I've heard 4. I've heard 3:30. Somebody's got to top this now. So it's out there. It's out in the airwaves. And we're going to wait and see who can break this. And somebody's got to do this for months at a time for this to actually stand, because it sounds like you've been doing this for a while.
A minute, yeah. And maybe my tombstone will read, if nothing else, he woke up at 2. So maybe that'll be my legacy, huh?
That is so good. There's got to be a book in there somewhere. The 2 a.m.er. Yeah, I don't know. Something to think about. Working with the big names, and then we'll definitely get into Steelway right after this. I got to touch on real quick Snoop Dogg, Tupac, Run DMC, Neil Young, all these, the music videos that you've done and produced, directed, executive produced, edited. What a credit reel. Unbelievable. Would love to just touch on some of it. If you have like a funny story with one of these guys, or just what's it like working with these A-listers? It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I had no idea that I would ever be getting into music videos. I had no plans on getting into music videos whatsoever. I was a feature film guy. I was doing a lot of low budget genre films as a young cinematographer, action films, horror films, war films, things like this, Battleground, Deadly Prey, Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bolorama, things like this. And, scripts that weren't worth writing home about, but I would pour myself into it, and my team and I would pour ourselves into it as far as the cinematography goes.
Sure.
I met a producer at a payphone by chance one day. I was at a payphone checking my answering machine, which is a device that existed back like before Shakespeare. It was this ancient device by which you actually to check your messages. There were no cell phones at the time. And there was a producer next to me who ran up to, I didn't know she was a producer, but a woman ran up to the phone next to me very urgently. And I could hear her urgently calling off a shoot. I was working on an electronic press kit, an EPK for an artist called Johnny Gill in West Los Angeles. And I come out to the lobby for this phone. She runs up to this payphone. She's urgently telling people, okay, don't show up tomorrow. The shoot's off. The shoot's gotten canceled. And she's going through a whole crew list. And so we just kind of chatted afterward. And her name was Sabrina Gray. And as it turns out, she was with a New York-based production company that was a music video production company that was here in Los Angeles to shoot a music video. But for some reason, there was some production glitch and they had to call it all off. And so I was urgently doing that. And so she asked me what I did. And I said, I'm a DP, a director of photography. And she asked what I did. I said, I do feature films. And she said, oh, well, our director, who also co-owns the company, it was called Classic Concepts, he actually wants more of a feature film look for his music videos. And I said, oh, okay. So she asked for my card. I gave it to her. Didn't think anything of it at all.
Right.
And so we went, but they called me a few weeks later and they said, will you shoot this video? We've actually rescheduled this video. We'd like you to shoot it. So I said, sure. And so we shot this video here in Los Angeles. And I the way I light, I was very moody in the way I lit things. And I had these artists performing in front of car headlights and their faces were sort of dark with edge light, things like this.
Sure.
Anyway, they take the footage, they go back to New York and they do what's called a telecine transfer. They're actually transferring it from film, we shot it on film, into digital. And they're looking at what it looks like for the first time. Because when you're shooting film, you don't see what it's actually looking like.
Right.
Anyway, I get a call and they said, the director hates your footage. He'll give you he's giving and then he got on the phone and said, I'll give you like a D for your work. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? He goes, it's underexposed. It looks horrible. I can't see anyone's faces. And I was like, okay, wow. I was on my way out to a party. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm sorry about that. And in my mind, I couldn't figure out what was wrong because I know technically what I did and it should have been perfect, Anyway, but whatever, easy come, easy go. I didn't care about music videos anyway. But that company, so that music video was for a group called Belle Biv DeVoe, and the music video is called Do Me. And as it turns out, that video went to #1. They called me back to go to New York to shoot another video, which surprise, surprise, And so I go there and they say, okay, we're doing a Public Enemy video called Brothers Gonna Work It Out. And we're shooting a music video for an artist called Kool G Rap and DJ Polo called The Streets of New York. We want you to shoot these videos back to back. And so I said, okay, I came out, shot these 2 music videos. The Public Enemy video went to #1 as well. And the Kool G Rap video went very, very high on the charts. He was a little more, he's very well known, but not as prominent as Public Enemy. And so those videos were really, really hot. So then I get a call from Malcolm Jamal Warner's agent and said, Malcolm saw your work on Kool G Rap and DJ Polo, and he really liked some of your lighting effects. He wants to know if you'll fly back to New York and shoot a video for an artist called Barsha, who's the master. I said, sure. Go back to New York. We shot this at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is this massive structure. And it's beautiful because you all have all these foreground structures you can dolly past, and you could put dust and smoke in there and shafts of light. It was amazing. We shot it in black and white. Wow. That became a hugely popular video. So finally, that Malcolm Jamal Warner's the head of his production company called Paris Barclay. His name is Paris Barclay. Called me and said, hey, we really like your work. From Malcolm's video, we're doing 2 videos for LL Cool J. We're doing Mama Said Knock You Out and a video called Around the Way Girl. We fly back to New York and shoot these for us. And I said, sure. So I go to New York and I shoot these 2 videos, and both of those videos go to the top of the charts. And that really began a journey that saw me doing a lot of East Coast work that would include Wu-Tang and GZA and RZA and Method Man and many others, and also work that would be on the West Coast here with Snoop Dogg and Dre and Tupac. Did 3 projects with Tupac. Brenda's Got a Baby. I directed and produced and shot and edited and composed music for Holler If You Hear Me.
Yeah.
And another one called When My Homies Call. So it was a very, and that just, my world, before I knew it, I was in feature films, and like in the blink of an eye, I'd left that behind, and I was in this new world of music videos, which was extremely exciting because visually I could take all kinds of chances. I was no longer tethered to reality. When you're shooting a film, it's like there has to be continuity. And if you're in a restaurant, you can't have like colored lights flashing everywhere. So I got a chance to experiment. As far as an anecdote goes, there are a few. It was really challenging working with Tupac because he is a brilliant talent. Was a brilliant talent.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this, that I had already produced 2 music videos for Tupac, and the record label called me and said, will you personally direct Holler If You Hear Me? And I said, sure. So first I met with Tupac in the recording studio in an area called Los Feliz here, just to the east of Hollywood. And we met in the recording studio, and he told me he wanted like this hard hitting music video. He wanted, pull no punches, straight no chaser, something that's really, really hard. So I said, okay, got it. So I went to a coffee shop called the Bourgeois Pig over here on Franklin. And I mapped out Holler If You Hear Me. And I knew this was a monumental song, and it's a monumental narrative as well. And it would become prophetic, as a matter of fact, in the wake of all the events that would happen with George Floyd, et cetera, in the years to come. Recognizing this, I said, this has got to be epic. So I basically did away with, we did away with all my fees, called in 1,000 favors, and created pretty much an epic shoot. And what happened was, and there was a point in time, as a matter of fact, this is something that we were shooting at a shooting range on the second day in Compton, and Tupac was with his friends, and he wanted a certain scene to go down a certain way. Now, we were already 2/3 of the way through production. The storyline was already mapped out. We'd shot most of the music video, and he wanted, though, this scene to go a certain way, which would have completely upended everything we had done. And so I'm like, Pac, that's not going to work because of this or that. Well, as it turns out, he got very, very upset. And we actually literally, he and his agent, rather his manager, myself and my executive producer, we actually stepped out of the building in the back. And it got so contentious. And by the way, some of his guys were like, one of his guys, we were shooting at a shooting range, pulled out a gun at one point and shoots a live weapon like within feet of a crew member. It's like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. So we thought we were going to have to shut down that production, as a matter of fact. And my client trusted me. We'd done many jobs together. So my clients were never on set with me.
Right.
But I'm like, this is bad news. I'm going to have to call them and call off the shoot because it was just getting very, very dangerous. And then there was this sort of kind of semi-contentious thing with Tupac and myself. Anyway, but as it turns out, the question is, okay, how to take what Tupac wants into account, because it didn't work with anything we'd already shot. We'd shot most of it. And how do we make this work? And it took a lot of sort of gear grinding. And I was actually finally able to map out a way to do that. So we shot the scene. He came back in from the limo. We shot the scene, and we wrapped up the production later that night, and that was good. Well, at the back end of that production, it was a very hard hitting music video. But as it turns out, concurrently with that, other people in other states, young people, were sometimes shooting law enforcement officers like while listening to Tupac music. So there were some lawsuits against the record label,
right,
holding them responsible, or accusing them, at least allegedly, of being responsible. So the record label calls me and says, you have to water this down. You have to water down this music video. So Tupac had told me that he wants this to be hard hitting and hardcore. The record label that I have the contract with is saying you have to water this down. So that was a huge struggle, and I found a good sort of medium there. And these are the stories. LL Cool J is a businessman. He's a sharp man. He's a smart man. I can tell you that when we shot Mama Said Knock You Out, we shot Around the Way Girl, which is a video that sort of tracks a lot of beautiful ladies around the streets of New York. We shot that on Saturday. And then for Mama Said Knock You Out, we shot that on Sunday. We had a limited number of hours to shoot each of these videos. There was no overtime that was approved. And I'll just say that LL was quite late showing up at the set on Sunday for the second day of shooting. And so our time to shoot Mama Said Knock You Out got radically collapsed, which is one of the reasons for the sort of simplicity of the video. And there are many. Okay, one last thing. We're shooting.
Go for it. They're legends, man. Great.
There's so many. Snoop Dogg. I still remember vividly. We were shooting Doggy Dog World.
So it's a great video.
It was a great video. And Ricky Harris is like at the beginning, the intro of that, his parents is like a Home Alone takeoff. And so his parents, Snoop's parents are going out of town, and they said, whatever you do, don't let the dog pound in the house, and kind of don't have any parties. And then the parents leave. And then we have a shot where we're on dolly track, and we push in to a close-up of Snoop's face as he does that Home Alone sort of a look, And we had to do that 1,000 times because now Snoop today is a legend, of course. And at this point in time, he was a fledgling legend, I'll say. The world was becoming really aware of his brilliance, but he was a fledgling legend. And so there was, he was still sort of, and he was, Snoop was a very shy guy. And so we would do that shot where his parents leave and we push into him kind of doing that Home Alone pose. And we would, roll sound, roll playback speed and roll camera speed. We push into him and he would be very uncomfortable. He would just go, that's not me, Dr. Dre. That's just not me. And he couldn't, it was just a stretch for him to do. And we shot that so many times. And we finally got like a take, where we could do that. But the stories are incredible because the personalities are so different. I had a key grip. I had a key grip from Wu-Tang punch my key grip in the face on a shoot. So I had to cancel production and fly back to Los Angeles. We had some incredible shoots for a video called called Shadowboxing Fourth Chamber. It was a GZA video, and it brought together 2 different songs so that 5 different Wu-Tang artists were performing. It was an extremely elaborate production that we shot in an area that I think is called Fort Tryon of New York. But it was I had designed this to be a lot of night exteriors, like in the forest, with these lightning flashes and campgrounds and this war being fought and these 2 armies of flag bearers, and this whole thing. And the weather, I've never been a sentimentalist. I don't care. We're always going to go where the best shot is. As a young cinematographer, I would take my crew members into the middle of a swamp and we would all get soiled if that's where the camera needed to be, because all that matters is what you see on screen, as long as you're not going to die from it, right? And even sickness is on the table because you recover, presumably. So we were just massive, and this is really a fantastic video on various fronts. It brought together a lot of really remarkable talent, and again, these 5 artists. And so we had this massive production scheduled, night exteriors, HMIs, which is a certain kind of very, very large daylight replicating light. Yeah. And like the day before shooting or 2 days before shooting, it started raining or snowing. So the producer's like, Steve, we can't shoot out in the forest. It's snowing out there. I'm like, what do you? So he was like, we have to shoot this on the stage. The production's too elaborate anyway. Let's just go onto a stage and shoot it. And I'm like, are you crazy? We're going out into the snow, into the forest, and we're going to shoot this video. And conversely, there's another Snoop video called, it wasn't, I'm sorry. No. Earlier on, the Snoop Dogg video was Gin and Juice, the one I was just referring to. That was Gin and so the earlier whole narrative I told was not for Doggy Dog World. That was for Gin and Juice. Yeah. Now, when it came to Doggy Dog World, to the contrast, we had a massive production plan on the back lot of Universal Studios with a massive block party with thousands of partiers, helicopter shots, HMIs, which are those big, massive lights, etc. Yeah. It was a humongous production. And literally 48 hours before we were supposed to shoot, took an urgent meeting with the producers, and they said, we have to meet. There's a crisis. And so we met at a place called Hamburger, like Hamlet on Hollywood Boulevard. And like 5 of us met there, and they said, this production is just way overblown. It's way over, we can't afford to do this production. This is too much. Now, this is like 48 hours before. We've already lined up gear. We've already lined up people, et cetera. And so literally on the spot at a hamburger restaurant, we improvised what would become the dog eat dog world that you see, like with all these celebrities like Pam Grier and the blaxploitation figures and that club, which was like right down the block from where the hamburger joint was. So literally in 48 hours, that entire video, which is now a legendary classic video, was completely improvisationally redesigned and reworked completely. So these are some of the narratives that we experience, and there are personality traits and differences and wars and things like that all the time.
Wild. Well, thanks for elaborating on some of that, because you see these legendary music videos and works, and I always come from the mindset of I wonder what was going on behind the scenes with that. And growing up in the industry myself, you have this back catalog of stories and experiences, and it's funny to see how there's so many things that change, not being married to the final edit because Murphy's going to show up on the call sheet. It just happens. So
you're exactly right. You're exactly right, Jason. And between like in rap videos, like much of production, there's a whole production between every shot you see. There's a whole production of stuff that went on. The movie American Beauty, the feature film, which I had nothing to do with, they basically decided in effect to like lop off and remove the whole last part of the movie. There was a whole courtroom, sequence and plot line. And they rediscovered that movie in post-production. So from the conceptual part through pre-production, the planning of the shoot itself, and the post-production, it's a very dynamic process with, as you say, Murphy shows up all the time. So you have to make do, and necessity is the mother of invention. And sometimes some of the most brilliant things you see on screen are things that weren't planned, but it was a response to some urgency that happened on set, and you had to find another way to do it.
Fix the problem.
That actually works better than what we planned. Happens a lot.
Yeah, and I think it was Brad Rushing who was on the show a few months back, who said you have to the Murphy's Law about on the call sheet. I think that was he was the one who originated that, because, and I never heard of that before. I was like, that's great. I'm definitely gonna have a back catalog of that one. Another great cinematographer out in LA. So let's get into Steal Away and give you some ample time to really dive into this. You wrote the script, correct?
I did.
Okay. And I have obviously is it available for reading at this point?
It is. If you go to the website, it's stealawaymovie.com or realmpictures.co.
Gotcha.
The script is right there, and if you don't want to read an entire script, we even separately posted just the opening scene. We're turning this inside out and want to bring the people, into the filmmaking process from the earliest stages. And go ahead and read the script and see whether you like, how you resonate with it. Yeah,
well, so it's based on Dark Midnight When I Rise by Andrew Ward, and I never even heard of the Fisk Jubilee Singers up until this point, and it really I dove in. I think I found a 1909 version of Swing Low Sweet Chariot, and to hear that 105 years ago, it really brings these characters to life. So I just think it's a great concept, great project. I want to give you time and space to really talk about it on the show, and the concept behind it, the intent behind it, and how you're going to roll this thing out.
Yeah, absolutely. When I discovered the story of the Fisk Jubilee Singers, I was blown away, and I hadn't known of their existence before. I'd heard a brief allusion to their existence. I just heard about them. In fact, my wife and I had a famous, what I now understand is a famous portrait of them commissioned by Queen Victoria in 1874, which we had hanging above our fireplace just as decor, without knowing their story or even knowing their name. So following the Civil War, of course, the great news is, following the Civil War, 4 million of enslaved, and I'll just say us, we as African, we weren't even African-American yet. We weren't even citizens yet. 4 million slaves were freed. We became citizens, and also the men got the vote as well, just as white men had the vote. great news. America is on its way to transformation. Radicals during this bright, shining moment are ruling Congress, and the radicals actually want full equality for all. Now, what happens is there's a massive, massive backlash in the Old South because not only the KKK, but there are many, many supremacist groups. They want to take back their lost land, and they want to find a legal way through a loophole in the 13th Amendment to re-enslave, actually, African Americans. So the Fisk Jubilee Singers, following the Civil War, and this choir still exists to this day. They just won a Grammy last year. This is a sensational choir of young former slaves fighting the KKK's reign of terror against their schools, including the fledgling HBCUs, which had just been founded, not with bullets or bombs, but with these sensational songs of faith and freedom. And Steal Away follows their sort of titanic rise from the darkness of slavery to the glittering ballrooms and throne rooms of Europe as they conquer the world and then have to sort of conquer their own demons. It's an amazing story featuring Queen Victoria, the Emperor of Germany, the President of the United States, Ulysses S. Grant. And this warrior choir actually ends up turning the world upside down. They save hundreds of schools from supremacist destruction, but most beautifully, this is not a Black film. It's a Black, a white, a yellow, and a brown film. It is very much a film. Many of the protagonists are Black. And at the same time, they're white. And in the casting, they will be Asian and Latino as well. It's a universal story. It's like a Braveheart or a Schindler's List or a Saving Private Ryan or Dances with Wolves. Yeah. And it will also feature the very strongest Black female lead ever in cinema history. Are you aware that never in the industry's 100+ years has a Black woman ever been the lead of an epic motion picture? It just hasn't happened. That content isn't written for women of color. Wow. So what's beautiful about this is it's a universal story. It's what Bridgerton has done for Netflix and what Hamilton's done for stage. This is a story that will do this for mainstream musical motion pictures. So we're very excited about it. It is based on Andrew Ward's Dark Midnight When I Rise, an extraordinary book that we own the rights to. And this is such an epic story. Again, it's not just a brief, like Hallmark sort of a story, nor is it a story that will go straight to Netflix or Amazon. It's a theatrical motion picture of the scope and sweep of a Braveheart. And we're very excited about it. We're currently at the financing stages. We are engaging investors right now to raise its $34.7 million production budget. Our fiscal sponsorship platform at Fractured Atlas is also about to open so that we can accept donations that are tax deductible. But most importantly for us, and this ties into my passion, we are about inviting the people of the world right into the filmmaking process. This is a story about hope, about redemption, and about race reconciliation. It's not a political film. It's not Republican, Democrat, or any other party. It's about you and it's about me. It's about us, and it's about us forging our way through what's often a darkness to find this unity. It's an impassioned story with passionate characters who have their darknesses that they have to battle as well. So we're bringing the people into the filmmaking process. That's why stage one, where studios always keep the scripts close to their vest. The way it works today, studios make movies. They don't include the public in that whatsoever. Now, the public really want to get involved in these things. I mean, we have NFTs. We have an age where the people want to be they want to be leaders in business, and they no longer just want to be consumers that are given these handouts of entertainment and given handouts of merchandise, but they want to be involved in the creation of these and in the business of merchandising as well. The studios don't work that way. They make content, they advertise it, they release it, we buy tickets. You have the makers and you have us, the consumers. But just like other business sectors are falling to the people's breaking into these rooms, we have the gig economy where people are like, no, I've got a car. You don't have to pay a taxi driver. I'll make this delivery and I'm going to be in on this economy. We are turning that inside out. So the script, for example, stage one is right there on the website. You can read the entire script from beginning to end. We've begun live reads already with the global public where they've read the script already. We're talking about acting. We're talking about cinematography. We're talking about the business. We're hearing stories and testimonies. There is a great poem that sits at the base of the Statue of Liberty. And that poem is called The New Colossus. And in effect, that poem looks at this woman with this mighty torch, and we know the gist of the poem there. It's written by a beautiful, a wonderful poet called Emma Lazarus. And the gist of that poem is, for you storied lands out there, you ancients and pompous lands that are only focused on creating wealth for yourselves, give us your outcasts. Give us the rejects from your lands. We hold our torch open for them, and we will build a great nation of your rejects, so to speak. And that's what Realm is. It's bringing the people into the room, making film of the people, for the people, by the people. Wow. So during the process, we're going to do the soundtrack with a global choir. This is going to be an epic soundtrack with orchestra, with choir, and vocalists. We are going to create a global choir with voices from all over the world. This is already being done, not in film, but there are global choirs that already exist, and we're using that technology so that the soundtrack actually is made up of people from around the world. Same with the orchestra. It will be recorded with a global orchestra. In searching for our cinematographer, our production designer, our costume designer, and even our editor, yes, we will explore great artists through the traditional industry channels, but we're also going to put out our feelers to say, who are some of those amazing artists in Nigeria that don't stand a chance of getting a meeting in Los Angeles? Maybe they're amazing, or Korea here, or in Helsinki. Yeah. So it really is looking to the world and having the world partner with us in the development and the making, and then in the distribution of the film. To sum it up, by the time Steal Away is released, which may potentially be the holiday season of 2023, we want for 1 billion people on planet Earth to have participated in the making of Steal Away. From a casting perspective, we've launched a global casting call already. We've discovered some amazing, extraordinary talent. A wonderful artist of color we discovered in Australia who's got this extraordinary talent, but she doesn't stand a hope of getting even a meeting here in Los Angeles. So it will be our privilege and our honor to welcome the likes of you. Perhaps some of your guests and some of your viewers, Jason, will maybe some of their music will figure into the soundtrack. Maybe if they're instrumentalists, maybe they'll figure in as well. So it's really bringing you into the room. So that's what we're doing here at Realm Pictures. And by the way, Steal Away is just our initial flagship launch film. It's one of 5 films that will inaugurate the slate of films we're starting with. And this is our new motion picture studio model.
Wow. That's all I can say. I'm like
sweating just talking about that.
I don't blame you. I'm sweating just hearing about it. It's the amount of energy that you exude, and that's what it takes. You know how it is in this industry. You've got to be energized to make something happen. You've got to believe in it. It all starts from the top down. And I can tell that you're completely convicted by this. It's completely authentic. And I really love the by the people, we the people, by the people, for the people concept. And then also, taking politics out of it, because it's just noise. It really is at that point. And I think art and creativity and the love of that, and music itself is, my God, it's a universal language. There's so much power with that. And for some reason, what comes to mind is I was reading in a book the other day. I didn't realize how much Martin Luther King Jr. had to do with Rosa Parks, because that was about 8 or 10 years before, I think, the I Have a Dream speech that came on the scene. And I was like, my God, this guy had so much to do, even with his message back then of love and nonviolence, and using that spirit, throwing God into the center of all this chaos and being able to change legislation through that. Yeah. It's unbelievable. So it's happened before in the past. Absolutely. And I think we definitely need that collective spirit of hope, and I'm all about it. So I saw this on Instagram somehow, in some way. It showed up on the algorithm, and that's why we reached out to you guys, because it's just, I've never seen anything like this before, and so blessed to have seen it and to have you on to talk about it.
Well, Jason, you're exactly right, and it's my privilege to be here, and honor. I'm so glad you reached out, and believe me, my whole team is going to be watching this, and so we're grateful. I would love to bookend our discussion and you talk about change, and you're so right. really nothing changes in the world unless we as pixels of this portrait change. We have to change. And so the question is, what brings about, beyond talk and the rhetoric and the press releases and, oh yes, we should change and we are the world and all these great concepts, what actually moves needles? It's when the human heart changes, right? It's when hatred is actually conquered then by love. And may I bookend our conversation by giving you one powerful example of how historically, with the Fisk Jubilee Singers, monumental hate was actually transformed into love. There is a particular, now it would be great if I send you a link. Could you, there's a Wikipedia page that here, in fact, let me just, maybe it's easiest for me just to read this, and anyone can go to, sure. If you go to Wikipedia and look up Cornerstone speech, you'll see a speech by a man called Alexander H. Stephens. Alexander H. Stephens was the vice president of the Confederacy. Yeah. He was called the Godfather of the Confederacy. And you'll see a picture of him right there if you go to Wikipedia. And in 1861, he made a very powerful speech explaining the whole foundation of the Confederacy. What is it based on? Why did the Confederacy break away? And he writes, and I'm quoting him, he said, he mocked Jefferson and others and mocked the founding of the United States because he said Jefferson's foundations rested upon the assumption of the equality of races. He said this was an error. And he goes on to say, our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas. Its foundations are laid and its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition.
Wow.
When the Fisk Jubilee Singers, this choir, this young choir, they're Gen Z, they're 14 to 21, 22. When they track that man down and they sing for him, Steal Away, and this is according to Andrew Ward's Dark Midnight When I Rise, that man covered his eyes and tears began to fall. And he said, oh my God, I've never heard anything like that. And by the time that choir parted from that man, that very man that I just quoted, he vowed to spend the rest of his life defending their cause. Jeez. That's hate overcome by transformation. It's not slinging mud and arrows and daggers and everything else at quote unquote the other side. It's about singing out hope and a call for reconciliation and a call for redemption into the ether, if you will, so that that fragrance, if you will, transforms hearts of darkness. So that's what this is all about. And I very much agree with you, Jason, that that's what we want for our nation and for our world. I literally want, as my team knows very well, when Steal Away is distributed, I want KKK members and Black Lives Matter activists both to have said, that looks like a great movie, and to find themselves at that same theater across the aisle from each other.
You're giving me chills. I mean, I have it right up here on Wikipedia. I'm going to read more about this. I'm going to dive into the script. I think it's fantastic that it's available for reading. It's unheard of. This is a complete upside down scenario. I mean, who does this? Stephen Ashley Blake does it. It's fantastic. I love this. And thank you for elaborating on that and capstoning this conversation with that story. Phenomenal. I had no idea about it. And history is so important for our youth, and to look at the mistakes of the past, to look at the things that were done right, though, because so much focus is on negative.
Yeah.
And just those little nuggets of positivity right there that you've sewn onto this podcast, we don't know who that's going to inspire, who's listening. You know, it's incredible. I mean, I was inspired by that. So I really appreciate you diving into it. As we kind of cascade down into a wrap up, I want to talk to you real quick about faith. I mean, we've dabbled in it, obviously, here the last hour or so, but your personal, you can get as personal as you want about it or impersonal. It's up to you. But general, faith and just kind of how that plays into your value system, and just want to give you a chance to speak about that and how you feel about it.
Yeah. So I'm a follower of Jesus,
Same.
and everything I do and is to serve humanity in the name of serving Him. Jesus Himself said, "The Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve and give His life as a ransom for many." In this age of darkness, of increasing suicides, especially among young people, futility, exasperation, faithlessness, violence, it's where's the light? And I've been commanded by my God to love. And not only to love is a powerful phrase in the book of 2 Corinthians, where the Apostle Paul, who's spreading this gospel of love, he says, everywhere we go, we're always diffusing the fragrance of the knowledge of God. And I love that. It's the idea of filling our atmosphere with light and hope. No matter how many times you have failed, you have sinned, you've done wrong, no matter, Paul himself was a terrorist who was party to the murder and the slaughter of Christians before his eyes were opened and he became a servant to the God of love. So everything that I do is in the name of Jesus. Honestly, it's for God's glory. But what God wants is for us to be in the process of blessing each other. It's to have our lives expended to touch even that very difficult person, that hate monger over there. Solomon Northup, who wrote his memoirs, are called 12 Years a Slave. He was the one that was enslaved for 12 years, an innocent man that was kidnapped, a black man in New York, free man with a family, kidnapped and sold into slavery, lost 12 years of his life in slavery while his family had no clue what was happening. And he, finally he got his freedom after a dozen years. And he writes in his memoir, 12 Years a Slave. It didn't make it to the movie, but he said, you know what? He says, it's actually not the fault of the slaveholder that he is so cruel, but the system in which he's raised, taught from the earliest childhood that slavery is right and that the rod is for the slave's back. He won't be apt to do away with those thoughts in later years. In other words, empathy. So my God has said, never repay evil for evil, but overcome evil with good. Love your enemies. And even if your enemy were to slap you on the cheek, turn the other cheek as well. You be an ambassador of love. So Steal Away is a postcard to the world. It's a song to the world that calls all to forgive and to bless and to seek brotherhood and sisterhood with quote unquote the other side. My desire is that when I leave this earth and I meet my Lord face to face, that he would say, well done, my good and faithful servant. And I believe that he intends to bless many, to save lives, to give hope and inspiration to those who are have traveled to the deep end and are even possibly at the precipice of ending it all, that he would bless many through their incredible story. And of course, the Jubilee Singers themselves were spreading this gospel of light and hope and of redemption to the world as well. So this is all about faith, seeking the kingdom first and its righteousness, and above all things.
So good. There's nothing to add. I mean, you've just hit everything. It's so good. I'll say that another quote from my dad, again, passed on from Martin Luther King Jr. He always put up on again, the blackboard that had a bunch of stuff on it when I was in elementary school, middle school. I was homeschooled during those years, so we had a bunch of stuff in the house. And one of the quotes that always was up there was, "Love is the only force that can transform an enemy into a friend." And he always instilled that into me, and he always and still does talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And even with the stuff that's going on today, how love really is the only answer. And there's a lot of the word I think I'm looking for is falsified forms of love that will show up. And I mean, from an enemy standpoint, if we want to get into spiritual warfare, that's a whole other thing, right? So to really find that authentic, true love and Christ consciousness in this day and age, in this industry, is such a blessing. So I got to tell you, my brother, my friend, thank you so much for being on this show. And I honestly, I feel kind of like prophetically, this is divine appointment for something. I'll say that on live. I don't know why that is, but there was a reason why we were kind of brought together here through the internet, and just can't thank you enough for everything that you've done so far.
Well, agreed, brother. Thank you so much. Again, it's a real blessing and a privilege to be here. And this was definitely God ordained. Very
Absolutely.
grateful
Absolutely.
for having me here.
Well, as we roll out, I've got a fun little thing that I do called the it's kind of like the popcorn answer shootout, whatever you want to call it. I still have a name for it, but it's just, I say a word and you just say the first word back that comes to mind. There's no right or wrong answers. It's industry related to the guest, and it's just kind of like a fun way to roll out here.
Okay.
Film.
TV.
There you go. Script.
Revise.
Lighting.
Shade.
That's good. Character.
Development.
Story.
Nuance.
That's good. Drama.
Humor. I don't know why my mind's going to these contrasts.
Well, the next one's comedy, so.
Drama.
Yeah, there
That's
you go.
The first one came to mind.
Audition.
Nail it.
I like it. Hollywood.
Tough.
Yeah. And pizza.
Mozzarella.
I like it.
I have no idea why those words came out.
Two last questions for you. One's pretty brief, which I was going to ask you earlier. You're from Pasadena. Was there any time at any point you ran into the Van Halen brothers? Just curious. Because I think
No.
or David Lee Roth, because they went to Pasadena High at some point.
And I went to PHS also.
Okay.
So yeah. But no, actually, never ran into them. Actually, I was into them among other things. I was into funk big time, but no,
Yeah.
I never ran into them.
Okay.
Tina Marie used to live like I guess in Pasadena too, not far from where we were, but no, I never ran into them.
Gotcha. And then I asked this is the last official question, which I ask everybody at the end, which is if you could go back in time to your 15-year-old self, knowing what you know now, what would you tell him?
Great question. Spend more time planning. On one hand, I'm very grateful for every segment of the journey that's brought me here, and every juncture has been invaluable to me. I wouldn't be where I am if the things that have unfolded, if any of them hadn't unfolded. And yet I would also say, think structurally more, Stephen. Spend time with coffee, or as a 15-year-old, I wasn't a coffee drinker yet, but with your Kool-Aid, and just spend more time charting things out. So maybe a little less meandering, although meandering is good, but maybe kind of weight things a little bit more to the planning process. I wouldn't really tell myself that, but that's how I would answer this question.
Sure. It's like a conceptualization almost,
Yeah.
Just a hindsight look. Yeah, sure.
Oh, no. Actually, I tell you what, there is one thing that comes to mind. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. There is something. This is very real, actually. One of the things I had to learn by hard knocks is have much more empathy and sympathy along the way.
Yeah.
I was more judgmental. I severed relationships that shouldn't have been severed. And I wasn't as accommodating to other sorts of personalities, especially when there were contrasts and whatnot. And I would tell myself, accept, embrace, and learn and grow, and pull the beam out of your own eye first. that is a lesson I wish I had. I was 1,000 miles from God at that point in time, but I wish that that's a lesson I had learned earlier on in my life. And I think it's, for me, one of the most important lessons that I try to bring to every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, where can folks find you? Because some people will listen to this. They're not watching it on YouTube, all the other distribution outlets. If you could just rattle off all of the social media for yourself and then Steal Away, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Sure. If you go to stealawaymovie.com, you'll find out all about the project. You'll find out how to audition if you're an actor. You'll find out about our upcoming talent calls for cinematographers, fashion designers, costumers, whether or not you're already in the industry. Part of this is about bringing people into the industry. And also you as a movie lover, how we need you to help us be our eyes and ears to great talent that's out there. You will find our I believe, 5 social media links to our 5 social media platforms, pages right there on the home page. And if you would, follow us on those social media platforms, because we're launching live events from there, engaging people like you from around the world. And we'll be announcing the progress of the film from now through the very end. And the script is right there for you to read as well, the whole script if you care to, or just the opening scene, so you get a sense of the flavor of the movie that will one day be.
That's great. This has been truly an honor to have you on, Stephen. Really appreciate it. And any other last words before we wrap up?
Just thank you. Thank you very much. It has been wonderful to be here.
Thank you too. Well, you guys have been watching, listening to the Jason D'Amico Show. Definitely check out Stephen's work. If you haven't heard of it already, you've probably seen it and haven't even known that he was involved with it. That's how much he's done in the industry. And definitely take a look at Steal Away and follow their social media and keep your tabs on that one for sure. We will see you all in the next episode. Thanks so much, and peace.